All right, so got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Jason Githens. I'm a Senior Program Manager on the Configuration Manager product team, and today we're going to cover security and compliance management in Configuration Manager 2012. Now, specifically what I'm going to talk about in that context is software update management, settings management, formerly known as DCM, as well as touching a little bit on endpoint protection. If you were in my endpoint protection session yesterday, you probably saw the zap of our TS session, so I'm going to run off the laptop today. We never did catch the perpetrator who knocked us off our session, but anyway, we'll go off the laptop today, so hopefully that won't happen again. Agenda is pretty straightforward. Overview of the security features, and the main point I want to make with the security features is to really think of them as as part of an overall solution, is the best way to put it. Rather than silos of features, I really want to focus on how they can service each other and focus on how you can think of the security and management together in the Configuration Manager product. So we'll do start with software update management overview, followed by a demo, and then move into settings management overview, followed by a demo. So you've seen this slide, I'm sure, multiple times. We'll just repeat our pillars of this release: to empower users, unify infrastructure, and simplify administration. So this first slide, what I'm going to talk about is a workflow of how you should think about the security features in Configuration Manager 2012. I'm going to cover three core areas of plan and configure, assessing compliance, and then remediating non-compliance. And I'm going to stripe that through, in this presentation, software updates and settings management. So the first part of plan and configure for software updates is your planning and setup, your targeting and delegation, and maximizing productivity. There are two pieces to maximizing productivity. That is, one, minimizing the impact to your network of distributing updates, whether they be frequent updates like definitions or monthly updates like Patch Tuesday. The other part about maximizing productivity is minimizing the end-user impact and instructing your users or training your users on how to take advantage of the new Software Center capabilities to configure things like non-business hours so that their daily workflow or productivity is not impacted by the requirements of security. In assessing compliance, we're going to talk about scanning for compliance and measuring. In the follow-up slides, I'll go into depth in each of these. These will basically be workflow diagrams of how the whole process works. It may be, some of you may understand that already, but it may be helpful to others. So we'll talk about a high level, how the sup role talks to WSUS, talks to Windows Update, writes the data back into the database, et cetera. And then in remediating, we'll talk about the best practices for deploying your monthly updates and then monitoring your ongoing compliance. In settings management, we'll go into defining where your plan and configure phase is really defining your standards. What do you want to measure? That's one of the most important parts of settings management, is really defining what exactly you want to manage or monitor and what exactly do you want to remediate. Because in settings management and Configuration Manager 2012, we have added the ability to remediate systems that have drifted out of compliance. So it's new from CM07, Config Manager 07, where you could monitor but not enforce. Now we have the capability to enforce, and I'll show that in the demo, the multiple ways you can achieve that. Before I go to the next, let me back up one. The other part of that planning is taking a good close look at all of the config packs available through the security and compliance tool released by our Solution Accelerator team. It's a free tool. It's a great way to get started on best practices for various operating systems, as well as Internet Explorer, et cetera, on ways to really harden your systems to Microsoft best practices. There's a link to their site in the back of the deck if you're not familiar with the tool. The assessing compliance aspect of settings management is deploying your baselines to a collection of users, if you want to enforce user-level control, or a collection of systems, if you want to enforce system-level control. And then the last phase is monitoring your drift, and then that piece I already talked about, remediating issues that may be impacting your settings, your desired state. on your systems. And the last piece I'm going to breeze through, this is really just to complete the overall security stack picture in Configuration Manager 2012. I already presented on endpoint protection yesterday, but so the workflow here, you enable the product, you enable and deploy the client, and then you monitor your malware activity, which is hopefully you're staying safe there. So I'm not going to cover endpoint protection in any depth today. However, it will be part of the settings management demo to show that better together story. In just a little preview of what's going to come in that demo, I've pre-initiated a malware that has modified settings on a system, and I'll show how settings management can conditionally put that system back to a known good state. For example, a malware has changed the browser homepage. You can use a dynamic collection, apply the baseline, reset that homepage back to your corporate standard. Client goes out of that collection, and then the end user can set it back to whatever they want, but you've at least avoided them going to the phishing site every time they open their browser. So I'll show that in the demo. So let's talk about the plan and configure phase first. And I'll take a sip real quick. So the first part is adding your software update point and selecting the product and classifications that matter to your environment. It may seem like a no-brainer step. You just select a bunch of stuff and you click next. But this is something you want to put some thought into because if you don't have one of these products and you don't plan on having one of the products, just selecting all is not a best practice. The reason it's not is that you bloat your database with a bunch of CIs that you really don't care about. We already, in this release, pulled one gun out of this box that we consistently got escalations that people had shot themselves with, and that was the ability to select drivers. There were 22,000 some odd drivers that were published in such a way that the value was very minimal, if any, but people would select all, end up with 21,000 or more CIs for drivers that then have to, before we pulled that classification or out of the console or out of setup, you would then have 21,000 CIs that you have to account for in SQL replication for no value. So just think of with the new SQL replication model and the fact that this is global data, just be careful on what you're selecting here and make sure it's stuff that you actually really need. So when you install the software update point, it configures the WSUS server, which you still have to install manually, through the admin SDK. So the admin SDK has to be available, though we don't recommend that you go into the actual admin console when you set up WSUS because the software update point will do all of that configuration for you. The initial sync of the catalog from the sup/WSUS server comes from Microsoft Update, and it brings down all the classifications and products that you chose. Now, I'll call it a quirk. You guys may think you may call it a bug, but one thing I want to mention here on your first configuration of software updates in Config Man 12 is that it's actually a best practice to not select any products and classifications on the initial sync and go back and do it from properties later. The reason being is that the WSUS has a pre-existing catalog of what was available when it was released, and that's obviously not going to be up to date with the latest products and like Windows 7, SP1, things like that. So just as a best practice, you're not going to break anything by selecting the updates in the initial setup or the classifications and products in the initial setup. But if you get everything synced up with WSUS and you let it sync with Microsoft Update, it gets the latest catalog. Then when you select those in properties, that next sync will bring everything that you intended to come down into your software update catalog or software updates in the config manager. So the catalog metadata, after it's brought down from Microsoft Update, is synced into the config manager database as CIs or configuration items. And that's pretty much it on this page, other than step 5 on the bottom left, is that this is also the point at which you could add, through the System Center Update Publishing tool, you could add third-party updates as well. And that's really what this next slide is about. This is a diagram that you can take home and reference if you want. I'm not going to go too deep into it. But the gist of it is that through the System Center Update Publishing tool, you can create your own updates, or you can download a catalog from Adobe, for example. You can publish those into WSUS. and on the next software update point sync, those updates will come into your console and be visible just in your software update list view of all your general Windows updates as well, Windows and Microsoft updates. So in the plan and configure, this is probably, you guys are probably familiar with this first step. It's kind of the no-brainer. You build your collections of the systems you want to target. The reason that the collection design is a little bit more, requires a little bit more planning in this release is that through the role-based access model, you can lock down who has the rights to deploy updates to which systems by your collection design. For example, if you have a server administrator with server, you can scope him to that collection, so he can only target updates to that collection, and you can scope the desktop collection to the other admin, and that way they don't even see each other's stuff. They can only target the systems that they have access to. So keep that in mind as you're building your targeting groups, i.e. your collections in ConfigMan 12. And the other option, the other capability that's there is that you can apply, since client settings are no longer site-wide, they are collection-based, you could actually disable software updates on a subset of systems and enable it on others on the same site. Whereas before, you would require a separate site server to enable, disable, because software update was a client setting that was site-wide, not collection-based. So that's why I put that step in there, because there's a little more thought that needs to go into building your collections for software updates now, as opposed to Config Manager 2007, simply based on what's been added to the product. Role-based access, I mentioned that in the collection section. This is really a way that you can divide up your software update administrators. It could be regional, it could be desktop server, etc. You can also scope the objects further if you want to further hide objects from different admins in console by just applying separate scopes, and that's a more in-depth role-based access discussion, which I'm not going to go into, but the whole role-based access piece is well documented if you need to go and figure out how to make it work best for your software update scenario. And then the last piece is to create templates. Templates are a way that you can then service the admins that you've defined through the role-based access and collection targeting model with your recommended settings for their scenario. So the top-level software update administrator can create templates that are optimized for servers, say honoring maintenance windows, things like that, or you may have a separate standard for desktops. So this simplifies the down-level admin's job, the delegated admin's job, because they can just go to the update group that gets created every month, which I'll talk about in a second, and then they can just add their deployment to that set of updates and apply their template, and they're done. And then they just move forward. So it simplifies their workflow if you do have a manual workflow in that area. One note about templates, in Config Manager 2007, you're used to seeing a templates node. There is no templates node. The templates are in the context of the wizard. So to create a template, you have to run through the wizard for Distribute Software Updates wizard. And you select the settings there that you want. At the end of that wizard, you have the opportunity to save that template. If you don't want to complete the DSUW exercise, you can simply cancel that on the last page, and you have your template, but you haven't actually created a deployment. So it's a little quirky, but that's how you do it in ConfigMan 12. The next piece is on plan and configure is mitigating your end user impact. Maintenance windows really haven't changed, so they're still applicable per collection. The one small difference in maintenance windows, and it's not really maintenance windows, it's about the default value we set for the time of updates. In Config Manager 2007, it was 20 minutes. With a lot of testing we did, we found that 5 minutes was plenty. So we've reduced the default value for software updates runtime to be 5 minutes, which lets you fit more into a maintenance window when it pre-configures what it can be installed in that window. So that's just a slight default change that we made in ConfigMan 12 relative to ConfigMan 07. Non-business hours. The big thing here is in Software Center, your user can be instructed how they can configure their non-business hours. Non-business hours are effectively times that they are not at work and that you can do stuff to their machine. So they can optimize their experience with software updates by setting these non-business hours. For example, as you can see on Melissa's computer, she can say software updates can be installed from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m., but during my workday, don't bother me. Now, that doesn't override your deadline. If you say that the updates are due and she has deferred this for 3 different times and it's deadline time, we ignore non-business hours because the admin intent, we feel, is more important than the end-user desire when it comes to security. They can't just defer updates forever or set a non-business hour window that never lets you do stuff to the system. So it's a great feature for the end user to really better control their destiny with software updates, but it's not something that would ever trump your administrative intent to patch the system, which is, at the end of the day, is what you're trying to do. And the Software Center is really just another optimization of the Melissa experience, Melissa being our end user persona, in a sense that she can really better, hopefully we never get to the point where she gets a countdown timer because she's had notification. She has the ability to install all the updates in Software Center. She can postpone those out of Software Center, or she can defer them to her non-business hours, at which point when she's done with work for the day, they'll just install and she'll be done with that process. So I'll show a little demo of that in the demo section as well. And then in the infrastructure impact, obviously use distribution points. The nice thing about distribution points in Config Manager 2012 is that you can still use throttling and you don't require a secondary site. So this distribution points you can use without the overhead of a secondary site, if that works for you. You can also use branch cache. If you're Windows 7, you can take advantage of branch cache, which will effectively share the updates after the first system has downloaded them. And there's an option, per deployment option, where you can set that deployment for software updates to take advantage of branch cache. So that's another great option in Windows 7 to consider. And finally, the internet-based users, nothing really different here other than a whole design change around internet-based management, which is no longer a site-wide setting. It's a role-based setting. The software update point's the same thing. You add the software update point, and you make it internet-facing, so you can have one internet-facing, one intranet-facing software update point per primary site. The main change here, which is we've gotten some really good feedback on, so I don't want to forget to mention it, is that your roaming clients will check Windows Update for content first. So you don't have to stage. If all you do is manage software updates on your, for example, for your internet roaming clients, that's all you care about, then you technically wouldn't even need a distribution point in your perimeter, because the client will get the policy from the internet-facing management point to say updates A, B, and C are required. But when it's time to get the content, when there's a future deadline, it will actually go to Windows Update and get the related content based on the updates you've approved in Configuration Manager. So the client will actually no longer has to come into your DMZ, internet-facing distribution point, to get that content. Now, it can fall back to that distribution point, but its primary source of binaries is Windows Update. So let's go into the scanning and measuring. So this is just a quick overview of how this thing works. So the client gets a software update management policy, which comes down as a client setting. And like I said, that can be targeted by collection. It's assigned a software update point, so you want to let our local policy apply that. You don't want to have a conflict with a GPO that's setting that to some other value, because you'll get in this condition where our scan won't work because we don't recognize the software update point, or in this case, the WSUS server, and we're not getting applicability results back. So therefore, in this loop, you'll see this in the log on the client, and there's a big red line that says, illuminates that there's a conflicting GPO pointing you to another WSUS server. Just be careful of that. So the Windows Update agent, we hook the Windows Update agent, and that's what does our scan against WSUS. So we scan the latest catalog, and the client basically assesses the applicability of every update in that catalog. And then the scan results are written to WMI. WMI is where we collect the results and send them back to our management point, step 4 there, and ultimately written to our database. The next step in scanning and measuring is then these are abstracted to the console, where you see exactly how compliant or non-compliant you are for every update that was scanned against. So the remediation piece, continue on. So the ADR, which stands for Auto Deployment Rule, which is new in Configuration Manager 2012, and it is our recommended way to deploy your Patch Tuesday updates now, because you can write very explicit rules in the auto deployment rule function, auto deployment rule feature, I should say, that will return exactly the updates you need, and it will run on a schedule that you define. For example, you can have it run on the second Tuesday of every month at 5 p.m. That it will go up, get every update that you've defined in the filter expression, bring that down, distribute content to all your distribution points, configure the deployment for the client, tell the client tell the deployment when the deadline is, and that whole process that you do now every month through DSUW, Distribute Software Update Wizard, is all automated. You implement, and can't really say implement and forget because you still got to monitor compliance every month, but you don't have to run through that Distribute Software Update Wizard routine every month. That's a Sisyphean task of rolling that rock up the hill and it rolls right back down. So at least the rock rolls more slowly down now. So the binaries are downloaded from Microsoft Update when you decide to deploy updates A, B, and C to your specified collection. They're distributed out to the distribution points. The client gets the deployment policy. It evaluates the deployment and says, I've got updates A, B, and C are now required for me at some deadline down the road. The client gets the update binaries from the distribution point and then caches them locally. Any future deadline deployment will result in a client caching the updates that are applicable to them, and only the updates that are applicable to them. So even if the deadline is 6 months out, if there is a future deadline, we're going to download the binaries. So the binaries will be cached on the system. The important point here, and you guys, a lot of you may be aware of this, but the SUP server, WSUS server, is only a scan source. It just has nothing to do with content. The content comes to the configuration manager framework. We do that so we can optimize the distribution of that content to the remote distribution points that optimizes or reduces, I should say, the WAN impact of every client having to traverse the WAN to get to these binaries. So that's why we fan this out to the distribution points. Updates are installed on a schedule or by the end user. The enforcement state message is sent to the MP and into our database. And the admin has a view in console monitoring or through reports the state of that deployment. So each deployment is then evaluated. They can monitor it, get to green, rinse and repeat next month. So let's go through the SUM workflow here. I'm sorry? The SUP client, the SUP client, there really is no SUP client. You mean delivering the config manager client through software updates? Yes. Okay. So, in absence of us ever really telling you how to use software updates, a lot of clever ways have been developed over the years for people to do this. So I wanted to try to get in front of that for this release and give some best practices. Again, each situation is different, and you'll have to modify it to fit your environmental needs. But I wanted to give you some best practice guidance on how to use software updates in Config Manager 2012. The first step is creating your update groups of all required and released updates that you care about. Now, some good news and bad news here. The good news here is that infamous 500 update limit is gone, but it's not really gone because it's 1,000 updates now. but there's a 1,000 update limit, but that covers a much bigger slice of updates. You can effectively get, for example, if you went back all updates, all products and classifications for 2011, you would still meet that limit if you boxed your updates by year. And that is a hard limit. It used to be a documented limit. It is a hard limit. And there's a reason behind that. It's not just we arbitrarily came up with a limit. The reason we do that is the performance impact on not only the system but the server when you have a high update count in a deployment. The client-side impact is that it has to evaluate every one of those CIs every time it evaluates that deployment, and there's perf impact on the client, and it has to do that in memory, and it could eventually tip over. So we want to prevent that from happening because you're never going to get to compliance if it tips over every time it evaluates the deployment. it's actually much more efficient. It may seem counterintuitive, but it's much more efficient to have a lot of deployments with smaller number of updates in terms of the client processing than it is to have or a few very large deployments. So I'll get into that in the next steps. The server-side processing impact is in summarization. We have to basically cross-reference every update in that deployment with every client in your environment every time we get new results back. So that intersection at 400,000 clients, or like Microsoft IT scale of 300,000 clients, that's not a small task. So, sorry, I lost my screen. So it's really, the 1,000 update limit was done there very intentionally. It's really to protect performance on both server side and client side. So that's the first thing to think about when you're creating your update groups. We're still in the getting started phase. So the first part of getting started in creating your update groups is really when you first move into Config Manager 12. And there are two ways to get there. You can migrate everything you've configured in Configuration Manager 2007 into Configuration Manager 2012 in the software update space. We will convert, you'll be coming from a model of update list and deployments into a model where we converted to update groups. So we will intelligently convert those to the update group schema when they come over. But that's the first way to kind of seed all your previous stuff. And that's like day zero, to get all your previous updates put out there. And the other way you can do that is to just start over. And an easy way to do that is using the new search capability. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to go to date released or revised and add that as search criteria. And then I'm going to do an is between value here. So let me just zoom in on this. So what you see here is, well, let me put some values in. But this is basically doing a date range of all the updates released in that particular date range. So I want to go and find all the updates that I need from, I'm just going to do my 2010 updates. So I'm going to do 1/1/2010 to 12/31/2010 and search on that. And what you see there is it returns all the updates in the top, about mid-level in the screen. You can see all the items returned, so 161 items are returned. It has the date range of those updates, and then what you can do once you get that group of updates and you've confirmed that boxing that you're using for all previously released updates is not exceeding the 1,000 update limit, what you can do there is you can just Control-A these guys, right-click, and choose Create Software Update Group. Now, creating a software update group does not deploy the updates. It is just a container for the updates. You have to explicitly deploy the group later. So creating the group is a very safe action. You're not doing anything to clients by creating the software update group. The question is that like the update list? It's similar to the update list. We've converged the update list and deployment in terms of the deployment is a sub-node underneath the group. So you can choose to deploy or not to deploy. But it's very similar conceptually to the update list, exactly. So if you box these, and I've already done this, and so we'll go over my software update groups, then I will have a group called 2010 Software Updates. And so this is my update. So this is my update group I've created, and I can choose to use it as a compliance group, meaning I don't deploy it. I just care about the compliance of the clients, all my clients relative to the updates in that group. Or, since it is under 1,000 updates, I can go ahead and deploy it. So this is the way that you can, so you can take all your 2010 updates, you can deploy those. Those are all basically you need to get all the updates you care about deployed to your clients before you start iterating month to month in Configuration Manager 2012. So I just use a simple tactic here of a compliance update group and a deployment update group is not a product concept. It's a concept of my own. So I just use the description field to delineate between a deployed group and a compliance group. Deployed group just implies it has a deployment associated with it. So then once you have your foundation, all the previous updates that you brought in through migration or that you brought in through creating them new through the search process, then you can start creating your month-to-month updates. Now, there's been a lot of, stemming from SMS 2003, this concept of sustainer groups and these various things that people move updates into groups. The main point I want to make about update groups in ConfigMan 12 is that the less you manipulate the members of the group, the more performant it's going to be all up. Because when you change a membership of a group, the client has to reassess that change, and we have to check their work. So it's basically like you've just changed one question on a standardized test, and the client's got to retake that test, and then we got to grade that test again. So the less manipulation you do with the update group is better all up for your environment. I've got a blog on this that's linked into this deck that walks through all of those important steps. If I'm confusing you or it's not making sense, check out that blog, and it's basically this in text form, what I'm saying today. So if you go to, so you've built your foundation, and then in the bottom here, per update group you've created, you have a graphical representation of every client, all systems. It's a statement of every system being compliant or non-compliant against every update in this group. So it's your highest level compliance statement. Now, if you were to drill into this group and look at the members, you would then see explicitly which updates are required in that group by number of systems. So you have a much more gradient breakdown or granular breakdown when you drill into the members. That first pane is just everything relative to everything. So that's the getting started piece. So the next step is moving into your month-to-month process. So the best practice there, and you could still do Distribute Software Update Wizard, that doesn't change, but the recommendation is that you move to this auto-deployment rule model. So an auto-deployment rule, as I said, and I've got two here pre-created, is effectively a rule-based system to bring down all the updates you care about. So I'm just going to go into the properties. I'm not going to create one here. I've got a full how-to video on how to do all of this online as well, but I've got a lot to cover, so I'm not going to go through creating the whole rule. But if you look at the properties of the rule, I'll just show you a couple of the key points. First key area is the property filters. So this is where you would pick things like the date released. So for Patch Tuesday, for example, since you're going to be running your rule end-of-day Patch Tuesday, midday Patch Tuesday, you want to set date release to last 1 day. That's important because you don't want to return every update ever published when the rule runs. So you do want to time box those. I have 1 month here just because I needed results and it hadn't been a recent Patch Tuesday, so ignore the 1 month that I have on the screen here. That should really just be set to last day. So if you click on this value, you can simply choose last day here and last 1 day. So basically what's happened here is you have your SUP syncing every day. At some offset of your SUP sync, you have your rules running. Give yourself a couple hours for SUP sync to fully complete. Your rule runs. It finds all updates that have been released in the last 1 day, which is every Patch Tuesday update, and it should be a list of 10, 15, 20 updates. It aggregated with the other conditions you set here. For example, you can choose product, and you also select list of products, so you're only going to get updates for that particular product. You can also do classification, you can do severity, you can do bulletin ID. That doesn't make much sense for a rule, but you may only care about updates with a bulletin ID, so you can specify the value that I only want updates that have an associated bulletin ID. And then the other piece, which is it's kind of a hidden feature, it's a little bit of an Easter egg here, is I'm in the wrong screen, but if you go down to something like, say, title, and you click on title, this is a kind of a neat little tricky way to eliminate getting, say, Itanium updates in your environment if you don't care about Itanium updates, because you can add a simple minus condition here. If you add minus and put in quotes the name, the partial string match of what's in the title that you don't want, Itanium being one of those, or a certain architecture of system, you can do that, add the minus value here, and your rule will exclude anything that has that title in the name. You can also use these arguments for required, whereby you only want updates that are required on a certain number of systems. You don't want the onesie twosies, you want something over 100. So you can just use greater than value here, and say greater than 100. I'm sorry? The question, is that available in 2007? No, because auto deployment rules were not available in 2007. This is the reason that this text has to be precise is that you don't interact with this again after you build your rules. Whereas Distributed Software Updates Wizard, you've selected a set of updates that you've returned through some kind of either manual search process or searching for the updates you want. In an auto deployment rule, it's going to run on Patch Tuesday. You may not even be in the office when it runs. It's going to create an update group, and it's going to deploy it. So in 2007 or in search in 12? No. No, this is something we added that we pass into the XML that we create that does the query for these updates. The greater than is as an integer, the title string. Yeah, you want to test this to make sure you're going to get exactly what you expect to get. A good way to test rules, and it's a great question, gentleman in the front hat, is could these rule conditions bite you and maybe exclude an update that you actually really need? And yes, that could happen if you don't write the expression right. A good way to evaluate rules, however, is you can uncheck, or you can, well, one, you could set the targeting collection to be a test collection with no members. That would be one way. It's not actually going to go anywhere. The other way is you can actually have the initial deployment set to disabled. So if you're not fully trusting the rules when you first start building your month-to-month patch process in ConfigMan 12, what you could do is set the rule to disabled after it creates it, and you could sanity check the results before it actually goes to the client. And then it's just a one-click option to toggle that deployment from disabled to enabled, and it goes out. The content will already go out, but you have one more process workflow step where you can say, let me just make sure I'm getting what I think I'm getting here. And you can just then enable the deployment at the end of that cycle. So there's just multiple values you can put into this, into the filter expression. A couple of other things to talk about are the one somewhat important thing on this page is state message detail level. For Patch Tuesday updates, you want to just stick with normal because you get the whole set of state messages like in progress, downloading content, pending reboot, all those states that you care about when you're monitoring the results of that deployment. For definition updates, though, that never reboot, they're very small, there's not a lot of transitive states, we added a value here called minimal, which returns a very small subset of the state message load, which allows you to deploy those definitions frequently to a large number of clients because every time they evaluate that deployment, they're going to send a big state message load up. So you want to set minimal because you don't need all that troubleshooting workflow in the state and definition updates that you need for Patch Tuesday. So that's the reason that value is there. Yeah, the question is, does that reduce the amount of state messages you get? It does, but it's conditional. It's conditional to the scenario. Definition updates, for example, never have a pending reboot state, so there's no reason to send one up that says pending reboot no. It's a wasted message. It has no value. Patch Tuesday updates, as we all know, often do have the pending reboot state, so that's required. The evaluation schedule, it's just what I talked about. It's when you set the rule to run. So this one's set to run on the second Tuesday of every month, and you can set that run at a particular time. The key thing to pay attention to is this other value we put in the same UI surface is we surface your software update point synchronization schedule. So when you're creating your rule evaluation, you don't have it running before your sync happens because it's not going to find any updates if you haven't synced your software update point. So you're going to be in a constant, and this rule's not working. Well, it's got to follow, and I recommend at least 2 hours between your subsync and your rule evaluation, and we post that right here so you know exactly what your subsync is, and you can offset your rule to run against that software update point sync time. So that's the evaluation schedule. That's the actual rule running. And then the deployment schedule, you have a couple of values you have to populate here. You have the available time. That's when the end user will first see the update. That's when it becomes visible in Software Center if you've enabled the end user to see it in Software Center. You don't have to do that. You don't have to enable pop-up notifications either. You can disable both of those. You can disable pop-up and show in Software Center, or you can show both. So the available time, the nice thing about available time is it gives you one of two things. It gives you that checkpoint where you can sanity check the work. If you have an enabled deployment, you can sanity check the results before it actually goes to available on the clients. It also buys you time to get your content out to the distribution point. So if an end user does see it, hey, updates are available, they don't have to go back up to the remote DP to get the content. You can buy yourself 4, 5, 6 hours so the content flows everywhere. So if they are the eager end user that wants to just get it over with, the content will be there for them, and they'll download it from the local distribution point. Or if they're not configured to use a remote DP, they won't get that error message saying content unavailable, which results in the help desk call. So you can buy yourself time through that process. Then the deadline is an offset of the next section down. The installation deadline is an offset of available time plus some additional value, and that's when the deadline will occur. So that's basically that's when they have to install it. I mean, deadline's fairly simple concept. And then you have your user experience settings, etc. So it's an offset of the rule runtime. Yeah. So it just it goes in. That's a great question. The question was, is that offset conditional on the rule runtime? And absolutely. So if you have your rule run at 5 and you add a 2-hour value for availability time as an offset of rule run, the available time becomes 7, and then there's an additional offset for deadline. Yeah. Exactly. So you can really use those to your advantage. That's pretty much it that I want to talk about in terms of rules. So the next step, towards the end of this best practice discussion, the next step here is let your rules run every month and just let them keep going. There's no reason to take 6 months of updates, 1 year of updates, and put them into some common deployment. You just let them go. Eventually, they'll age out anyway. All the updates for that particular month 2 years ago may just expire, and they're going to be gone anyway, so there's no reason to manage those in another container of updates. Just let them go, and the client will evaluate them, and it's actually better performance. And the other thing that may not seem to be adding up is, well, what if I have a client come out of a closet and it evaluates 10 months worth of deployments? Well, we batch those. So we'll put all those together into one big deployment, and the end user will just see a long list of updates. The deployment concept is an admin concept, not an end user or end client concept. So if they get 10 months of updates after having been offline for that long, they'll batch all those and install everything in that deployment. Single reboot. So there's no reason to do this manipulation of these groups. Just let a new group get created every month, let it go out. You monitor that deployment state through in-console monitoring. You get to green, and you kind of forget about that month, and you move to the next month. And that's the way to keep your deployment strategy after day 0 when you built that foundation. The other piece of that is that you can still take the updates in a group, and I'll show you an example of that. So I've got my April updates here, and everything's not looking so good there. I've got 2 non-compliant, but let me look at the members. Absolutely. Yeah, the expired update has no impact on the other members of that deployment. I'll get to that. That's the last step in the workflow. So I have my members here. Say I've gotten to green on April. I've finished my April patch process, and I just select all these updates. What I'm showing here is the ability to select these updates, and I'm going to click on this edit membership value here. And let me zoom in on this. And what I'm showing here is you click Edit Membership, and now I can add these updates to a non-deployed group so I get that aggregate compliance. So what I'm doing is I'm building up my 2012 year up compliance group, but I don't have to deploy it. It's just a grouping metaphor. It's just a place where I put all of my updates for 2012. Every month I slide all the new updates per month into that update group for 2012. What that gets me is when I go to reports, I can see how well any number of collections is doing against all updates in 2012, but I don't have to redeploy that set of updates. I just let my monthly updates continue going. So cancel out of that and get to the great question here on how do we handle expired updates. Well, the good news is we now automatically remove the metadata and the related content from your distribution points for all expired updates. So that goes away after an update is expired by sync. The other thing that we no longer do is, if you tell us not to, is we don't automatically expire superseded updates. You control that. If you want a superseded update to be available, that's your decision. We no longer just automatically expire it like we used to, and which caused a ton of workflow and process problems for a lot of customers. So you can configure at software update point setup how many months you want to go back and persist a supersedence chain without us automatically expiring it. So to the expired update question, the one thing we don't do, and I've got a blog on this that explains the process and also has a script, which I'll get to in a second. The one thing we don't do is we don't remove any expired updates in an active deployment. We don't want to just remove things, and suddenly you had a deployment with 9 updates, now it's down to 6, and you have no audit trail. Where the hell did those go? And you don't know why they're gone, because there's no work back to tell you that, oh, we removed them because they were expired. So we still ask that you do the removal of the expired updates from any deployment that they're in, but it's really super easy, and I'll show you how. First thing I want to point out is the new iconography that we use. So this is a software update. This is a list view of all my software update groups. Anything with a black X means there's at least one expired update in the group. Anything with a yellow star means there's at least one superseded update in the group. And those go down the chain. So one expired update would trump the icon for an expired plus a superseded, because the worst case is an expired update. So the quick single glance view that you have is you can just look down your update list icons and instantly tell which groups have an expired update in them. So that's kind of the manual step. That's not super fun to sort through and remove updates manually there. So there's a much easier way to do that. So if you go back to the search functionality and you choose expired, what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for an expired, my value equals yes, and I simply search there. What I get back is my list of all expired updates in my system. My next step here, and this should be part of like a quarterly or, no more than a quarterly workflow. Really, it's up to you, but a quarterly workflow is fine to get rid of the expired updates. If you select all of these, right-click, choose Edit Membership, we show you every group that there's an expired update in, and all you have to do is uncheck the box. Oh, sorry for that. Zoom it, faux pas. All you have to do is uncheck the box, click OK, and we'll go remove those expired updates from any deployment that you have out there. So it's a super easy process. You search, edit membership, uncheck the box, and we remove the updates. Then what happens, and I get into all the details of this in the blog that's, again, linked at the back of this presentation. The last step there is we don't clean up source content, but I provided a script that will go remove the source content as well. So you just run the script as a scheduled task every month, and that'll remove source content for any obsolete object that's referenced in the database. So it looks at the CIs, it looks at the unique identifier of the updates, correlates that to its source binary. If it's no longer active, if it's obsolete, if it's expired, or if it's out of the database altogether, we'll go remove the source content with this script as well. So it's a way to manage your content end to end. Yes, question here. So the question is about endpoint updates. A great question. If you think back to the auto deployment rule that I referenced, the best way not the easy way, that takes care of it for you, because the supersedence chain and definition updates is the 5th one's always expired. So you always have 1 active, 3 superseded, and the 5th one's expired. And that's like a rolling window as it goes down the release definition updates. So our rule will never put an expired update in the deployment when it runs. So the rule, by its nature, sees that there only will ever be 4 updates when you use an auto deployment rule to deliver definition updates, because the expired update will be removed automatically by the rule from that deployment. When it's removed from the deployment, it falls into that it's fair game for us to clean it up. We run a weekly process that then will clean that update out of our database, which then result in Dist Manager no longer having a reference to content. Will go out and clean it off your distribution points. And then the script will clean up that source content. But there's a very detailed blog on this thing end to end. Encourage you to go reference that. Got one more question here. I'm sorry? Yes, it does. Yeah, the cleanup from the deployment. Well, when we do the content cleanup piece for expired updates, distribution manager goes out and pulls all the content off the DPs too, for expired updates only, and expired updates that you've removed from the deployment using that process I just showed you. I'm gonna have to wait for questions at the end because I got 25 minutes left and I'm not making a whole lot of progress here. So I'm gonna blaze on through to the next section here. That's pretty much it for recommended workflow. There's a blog on that. There's a blog on cleanup, and you feel free to ask me any questions after. But I need to jump back into the deck and get moving here. We're not going to get to the other stuff. This is just bringing it all together. This is basically everything I just showed you in the whole process. It's going to be good for reference later, but I'm not going to get into the details here. It's pretty much every step we've already talked about. There's a best practices recap. I'm not going to repeat what I just said, so this is really for you to reference later, just as a reminder, and this is also referenced in the blog. So again, I'm going to blaze through this piece. And let's move into settings management. So what's new in settings management I already really touched on earlier. The big thing is that you can actually do remediation through settings management. You can also copy settings. You can trigger console alerts. We have much richer reporting. And at the bottom here, I don't know if you can see that in the bag, but the bottom, the baseline configuration items, these are all of the various ways you can create your configuration items to do that validation of compliance as well as resetting compliance. For example, you can WMI query, or you can do a script-based remediation. I'm actually going to show you the script-based remediation as well. And on the far bottom right of the screen, you can see the reference there to the Solution Accelerator solution, which has all of these compliance packs that are available or configuration packs that are available that meet government standards. And you can then import those into Config Manager 12 and deploy those to get an assessment of standards based on various compliance of standards, government and otherwise. Kind of going a little quick through this to get to the demo. One of the really cool things in settings management that really enhances usability in Configuration Manager 2012 is the ability to browse a gold system. You can get to the registry of a gold system, registry and file system of a gold system to pick out the values that you care about, so you don't have to cross-reference and type in a reg key or cut and paste a reg key into your configuration of the settings management configuration item. So that's a super cool way, and I'll show you how that works when we get into the demo. And then we do revision control. So if someone changes a configuration item, we not only audit it, but we also show the revision history of the configuration item. So if you make a change that blows your compliance numbers, then you're like, oh, I set the registry value wrong. You can revert back to the previous version where it was working and try again. So the revision control keeps a revision history that for a drop down per configuration item, you can revert back to the last known good if you make a change that ends up breaking your configuration matrix. These are just screenshots, which we'll see in the. I'm not going to show revision history, but this just gives you an example of how we track the revision, and we also show you the modified by, so you can see which administrator made that change. So you know who to yell at if your compliance numbers go from green to red in a couple hours. Okay, so the other, this is really servicing that user-centric pillar of this release. You can target these baselines and CIs to users or devices. So you can evaluate the compliance based on the act of the user logging on, and if it's a shared system, evaluate the compliance of each user that logs on, or you can evaluate system-level compliance. It also supports, like every feature does, role-based management, and we've already talked about revision history. So let's go through these screenshots. Compliance monitoring. I didn't show that in software updates, but it's actually, I'll show it in the context of the baseline deployment. But in-console monitoring is our new way to monitor your the status of a deployment. A baseline for settings management is one of our deployment types. So in the deployment monitoring view, you get a list of all of your compliance numbers with this tab-based view, so you can see if you're non-compliant, what the non-compliance classification is, and then all of the assets that are in that particular non-compliance result. So that's right in console. We also support drill through, so you can get to an asset list view, and you can also build collections based on the state so that you can then remediate through another option, using packages and programs or applications, etc. This is just a little reporting view. Obviously, we have reporting, and reporting has been expanded for settings management in Config Manager 12. And we'll walk through this, so I'm not going to spend time on the screenshot. So let's just cut over to the demo. Sorry for that rapid fire tour, but I really wanted to get into the demo on this. Okay, so I've pre-created a baseline to remediate that malware situation I talked about at the introduction. And I'm going to walk through creating a CI just so you get a sense of how easy it is to do. So under Assets and Compliance, you go to this Configuration Items node, and you can create new configuration item. You can also import them. So in a lot of my blogs, particularly related to endpoint protection, where there's a relevant settings management thing you can do, since you can import-export now, I try to post the export right on my blog so you can just import it and not have to redo all the steps that I talk about in my blog. So it's just a cool feature. It could really be a community-driven way to share really cool stuff you figured out how to do in a way that people don't have to type a bunch of stuff to get it to work. They can just import your exported cab. So if you create the configuration item here, we'll call it test. We have some out-of-box categories, or you can create a category. We'll create one new one called security. We'll choose security there. That's just the OS platforms. And this is really we're getting into the kind of the brains of the capability here. So we're going to call this one reset IE homepage. It's going to be a registry value. It's going to be a data type of a string. And we're going to use HKey current user. And here's where the browse functionality comes in. So I'm going to browse to my local system just because it's a little faster. But what you see you can do here is I can type in the remote client that I want to browse to. It doesn't have to be the local client. So if you have this gold system, you can connect to the remote client. You just do client 2. In this example, you choose connect. I've already connected, so it's already there. But what you see here is you can see the remote registry of the system if remote registry service is running. And from there, you can pull all the values back that you care about that you want to assess compliance against. So it's a super fast way and a much more intuitive way to build your configuration items than having to do all of that manually. So I'm just going to do a simple value here of current user on my local system, software, Microsoft, Internet Explorer, and main. And I'll zoom in here in a second. I'm just getting to where I wanted to go. So what I'm picking here is start page. One second. What I'm picking out here is start page, which is one of my browser, where I want my user to start when they open their browser for the first time. So that's the registry setting I browse to. I don't care if it exists, I just want it to equal what I want it to equal. So I go down here and say that this registry value must satisfy this rule. And it must equal, well, we don't want it to equal IE setup, we want it to equal, we want it to equal bing.com. So if it doesn't equal bing.com, we are going to set this thing back to bing.com. Again, in this example, I'm doing this conditionally because you may not care what the user sets their homepage to, but you do care if you know that malware's modified it. So you want to set that conditionally based on a collection you've built, again, relative to a dynamic condition of malware state settings changed by malware, so that you conditionally apply this baseline to that client, and you put it back temporarily. And the user can reset it again, but you've gotten them out of the bad state. So we're going to set that to Bing. And that's pretty much it on that page. Then we go next, and these are just the compliance rules. So the thing we need to set here is everything's already configured, but we want to set this value to make sure remediation happens. It's this checkbox underneath the setting compliance statement. It says reset IE homepage must equal bing.com, and this value here, remediate non-compliant rules when supported, and in this case it is supported, so we simply check that box. We set the compliance severity to critical, because this is a critical security event, and we are done. So that's really how easy it is to create your own CIs. You can also import them. All of the config packs from the solution accelerator teams are importable. So there's a lot of ways to build your foundation to get started with settings management. So I'm going to cancel out of this because I've already created this baseline. And the next part of this, the baseline is really the ship that carries the payload. So the baseline is the actual deployable object. The CI is effectively just an instruction that the baseline carries to the client, and then the baseline evaluates every CI associated with that baseline. So the next step here that I want to do is create the baseline. Let's call it test or something. And it's a simple drop down here where I pick any number of existing configuration items that I've already created, and I add them to this baseline. So I'm going to cancel out of this because I've already created the baseline. So as you can see here, my baseline is called Reset System Security Settings Modified by Malware. The object that I want to target, or the condition I want to remediate, is when I have a client in this collection, which I built dynamically, which is a malware equals manual steps, and I have one member in there. So I have a malware of this type already showing up in my system, and in a real workflow, I would have pre-deployed this baseline to that collection, so this situation would have been fixed. But for the demo, I didn't want that to happen too early, so I need to go back to my baseline, and I need to just deploy it to that collection. So I'm going to pick the collection for this baseline to go to, which is going to be that malware manual steps collection. Click OK. And I want this to reevaluate every day. And so this is deployed now. So we'll give that a second, and I'll cut over to my client and refresh policy there. So what I wanted to show you on my client is my start page here has been changed to ESP infection. I thought that was pretty clever. There's not really a site called that, but it sounds malicious, so I use that one. So that's not good. And the other thing that's going on here, the other thing I'm going to remediate is typed URLs. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want IE to I don't want Internet Explorer to auto-complete these when my user fat fingers it again and goes to the site again. So I don't necessarily want to clear their history, so I'm trying to balance end-user impact with security necessity. But I do want to minimize the fact that they could fat finger the URL again and go right back to that site because they forgot a letter or something. So what I'm also going to do is a scripted remediation of the typed URLs. And as soon as I said that, I realized I did not show you the part about how you do a scripted remediation. So let me go back to the configuration item. So I have the two configuration items related to this baseline. One was reset the IE start page. The other one is this guy called clear URL, typed URL history. So if I go to properties here, I go to my settings, compliance rules, and I look at the value of this. What you see here is I have a discovery script and I have a remediation script. And what you can do when you do a scripted remediation and a scripted compliance check is you can pass various script types, and I'll show you here. You can use JScript, VBScript, or Windows PowerShell commandlets to check for a condition, and then you can use another script to remediate if that condition exists. So what you see here is a simple script that I wrote to basically just validate that the typed URL key exists, not super exciting. So cancel out of that. And then I have a remediation script that will clear out the typed URLs. So this is what's going to run if that key exists, because we know that this system needs to have those wiped out so the user doesn't fat finger themselves back to the phishing site. Super easy to use because there's no payload. The script is processed as part of policy. So you don't have to deploy a VB script as a package program. It's just part of the policy of the configuration item itself. So it's a super cool way to really come up with some great ways to reset values, using PowerShell, VB script, JScript. And I just wanted to show you that piece. And I'm also buying myself time for policy to refresh on the client, so it's working out well. All right, so we've checked here. We've got typed URLs. We've got a start page. One second. Under main, we've got the start page showing ESP infection, so we need to fix this guy. So let me just update policy or see if maybe it's updated already. Okay, so now you see that I've got, under my configurations tab in my baseline, I have a new configuration baseline. This is in the client UI. Clearly, this would run on its own. I wouldn't have to run this manually because the user's not going to do that. But for the demo, I wanted to show this. So what you do here, I'm going to evaluate this condition, see how I'm doing. It's going to show me non-compliant. Actually, let me refresh policy and make sure I have the right one still. So it shows me, oh, I didn't mean to close that, sorry. So it's going to show me non-compliant in that. Evaluate it again, in progress. And now I can view the report. And it's going to show me what's going on with the system. So you can see my non-compliant value is that the rule name, it should equal Bing. It doesn't. It equals this bad value. So this shows you here in this browser view on the local client what the situation was and what the remediation was. And I'm thinking I probably forgot to check to remediate this condition. Let's see if it did fix it. No, it's still the same one. I think I forgot a checkbox. Sorry for that. Go back to the primary site, go to my baseline. Yep. So this is another thing kind of a trap to watch out for. I didn't do this intentionally to teach you a good best practice, but I did it, so I'll tell you about it. If you're using remediation in your deployment, you also have to configure the remediation rule to run. This allows you to deploy to some collections where you may not want remediation to happen, but you want it to happen on others, but you don't want to change the CI logic. So this checkbox is important, otherwise you're not going to have anything fixed. So let me check that. Sorry for that. It was a great way to show you the trap I fall into consistently. So I checked that. That's going to update the baseline policy. So let me go back to my client. Refresh machine policy. Give that a couple of seconds to process. And I can take maybe a question while we wait on that, if there's anything so far. It is, yes. Yeah, the question is, HKey local user, is it user logged on dependent for each user? And it is, yes. So if another user logged on had the same problem, then it would clean them too. Correct, yes, because that key is not populated, exactly. Group policy will, the question is if you have a conflict of group policy and local policy applied, group policy will win. So, yeah, that's something to consider. It's a good question. So let's see if this configuration has been updated, which revision we have. Let's evaluate this again. Okay, now it's showing compliant. That looks a little better. And good. So this time it worked because I set that value. So what you'll see now in the registry is, hopefully, so now we go back to my start page. It's been reset back to bing.com. Go to my typed URLs, and this reg key is now empty. So these are gone. So when I go type a URL into my browser, it's not going to autocomplete to the bad site. So that worked, so we're good. Now back, one last thing. I'll spend one more minute on this. The last piece is that in-console monitoring piece that I skipped over on software updates. But if we go to our deployments, we'll see this baseline deployment, this reset security settings modified by malware. Let me summarize that. And then I can view status, and I'll get this detailed status pane with multiple tabs to show the various states my systems could be in. So this one we're in good shape here. This one's compliant. Shows you the compliant state there, or it shows you which CI it's compliant for. And then in the lower pane, and we always have this pattern of the category at the top, the assets at the bottom, you will see the resource that is compliant for that particular I mean, the compliance view is not that compelling. Really, where you're going to spend your time is non-compliant. That's the ones you care about, not the compliant view. So that's the in-console monitoring piece. Let me cut back to my slide deck here. And this is basically just a summary of everything I talked about through the plan, configure, assessing, and remediating phases. Online resources. These are all the blogs posted to date. There'll be new ones coming. I've got a whole backlog of things I got to finish that are currently in flight. And they're how-to videos, product documentation, and then the Security and Compliance Manager config packs referenced at the bottom of the slide there and links. So you guys can access all these links. And I've got a few minutes for questions, so you can step up to the mic or ask it, and I'll repeat it, however you guys want to do it, or just congregate up here, whatever you guys prefer.